Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 U.S. Dry Bean Harvest Overview. My name is Raul Caballero. I'm the in-market representative for the USDBC in Mexico. Muy buenos días a todos y bienvenidos al reporte de cosecha de frijoles de los Estados Unidos 2024. Y bueno, vamos a comenzar en breve, pero antes quiero presentarles a nuestro director ejecutivo, Daniel Rollerson. And to kick off this webinar presentation, I would like to introduce Danny Rollerson, our executive director, so he can welcome you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 U.S. Dry Bean Council Harvest Report. Thank you for everyone's interest in participating in this webinar this morning. And before I say anything else, I want to publicly thank Raul Caballero and Dee Richmond for organizing this and putting all this together. And to count at the moment is 125 participants that we have, and we are expecting a lot more to join us. So again, thank you for your interest in U.S. dry beans and our harvest report. And I will conclude by saying thank you for purchasing U.S. dry beans.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jon Berthold. I'm with the Green Valley Bean, and I'm also the North Central Bean Dealers Director on the U.S. Dry Bean Council. And I'll be presenting the North Dakota and Minnesota harvest highlights for this year. Let's start off with Let's start off with planted acres for this year. Pinto bean acres, these, just to be clear for clarity, these are planted acres, not harvested, and this is also USDA has not broken out the data by class this year, so I used FSA data, which is generally regarded as being pretty accurate. So, and these numbers are just for Minnesota and North Dakota total. This year, pinto bean planted acres were up about 43% from 2023 across Minnesota and North Dakota. Black bean planted acres were up 67%, with the majority of that coming from Minnesota. Minnesota jumped up almost double from what they planted last year. Kidney bean acres, dark reds, were also up about 40% from last year, a 15,000 acre increase. Light red kidneys were basically even, up 1% from year over year. And finally, navy bean acres. Navy beans were down 20% and have been on a steady decline since 2022. They were down about 17,500 acres. And the last slide here is just a breakout of just the distribution of acres across North Dakota and Minnesota. 58%, pinto beans make up 58%, and you can see the rest of them between black beans, navy beans, dark red kidney, and light red kidney acres. They're a pretty small percentage. Kidney bean acres amount for about 7.5% of the total in the region. Quality this year. Black beans are overall a very, very good quality this year. Maybe a little light on moisture, but in general, very, very nice quality. Pinto beans, good quality as well. Color may be off a little bit, you can see by the picture, but generally very good quality. Kidney beans, I've been in the kidney beans in Minnesota for over 30 years, and I think this is probably the best overall quality crop that I've seen in 30 years. Just a very, very good quality crop. Size is maybe down ever so slightly. That's due to the dry conditions. But again, very, very good quality crop. Yields, Yields for pinto beans, black beans, and navy beans were generally average across the North Dakota and Minnesota growing regions. Some places were above average, some were a little bit down, but surprising, no surprise, things always seem to come to the average. Unfortunately, on kidney bean yields, we were down about 15% from the previous years. And this just has everything to do with very, very dry conditions, really from middle of July on. We had very, very little rain that came through, and it was pretty hot. So yields have been down, 15 to 20%. As for stocks, pinto bean and black bean stocks are good. No supply issues are expected. Navy beans are more balanced, even with their decreasing acres over the past year. But so there's a potential for that to tighten up by the end of the season. Kidney bean supplies are very limited across everything. That has everything to do with crop failures and other growing regions across the world and being down 15-20% in yield. That didn't help anything either. Going forward, outbound shipments have been strong across all varieties this year, at least to start out. I think most bean processors and shippers have been very, very busy, and we expect that demand to remain through this crop year. We're seeing some increased interest in buying from U.S. government for food banks, feeding programs, things like that, and exports have been very, very good. I expect kidney bean plantings will be up in 2025 in reaction to the tight supply situation. There won't be any carryover going into the 2025 crop. I think to be noted on that, the entire supply will be out in the field and subject to any production issues. So it could make for some volatility if we have any weather issues across the year. And we expect the carryover supply of 2024 crop pinto beans and black beans. How much is the question? It just depends on, it's really going to depend on export demand as we go through the rest of the year. We're just into it now for a couple of months. We've got a long ways to go, but that's it. We'll look forward to the question and answer session. Thank you.
Everybody, thank you for the introduction. Once again, my name is Scott Bales. I'm here to cover the Michigan highlights. I work for Michigan State University, as part of our on-farm, field research program. Also working closely with the Michigan Bean Commission. So that's kind of how I fit into the Michigan industry here, working with our growers. We'll kind of follow the same template here as the rest of our talks from each region, starting with quality. So the 2024 crop quality here in Michigan was really good to excellent for the majority of the crop. Harvest began in early September and was nearly completed by October 1st, which we can see by the chart here on the right, was slightly ahead of progress. We really had drier than average harvest conditions and lots of heat units through the summer. So that crop really came in early and really came in fast. This is the first year that I can remember where we didn't have, any significant delays in harvest. It progressed steadily for the better part of a month, right to, virtual conclusion. And with those drier than average harvest conditions, secondary drying, was really not a factor in 2024. And I know some people get worried, when you say drier than average, if we talk about, mechanical damage, splits and checks and those kind of things. But really, we didn't see a huge issue with that at delivery. The crop came in really good shape. We were dry, but not exceptionally dry. So it was really a good, happy medium for us. And with those conditions, we really seen, good color across classes. We didn't see a lot of oxidation that we can see in those, wet, cloudy type years. So overall, looking at very good quality out of the Michigan crop for this season. Yeah, moving on to yield, which will lead us to overall production. If we look at USDA numbers, they are predicting an average of 2,600 weights per acre, which is nearly 3,000 kilograms per hectare across all acres and market classes here in Michigan. If we compare that to our 5-year average, that rolling average is about 23 and a half, bags to the acre, 100 weights. So really it'd be an above average crop, that they have us, set up for this season. If we look at the past season, a lot of things didn't add up, to have a really exceptional crop, like they're predicting. We had an average timing for our planting season, but it was really wetter than normal. Our soils were at or above field capacity for the better part of the first half of the growing season until we went, very dry. So we were really wet, heading in the first half of the season, which did lead to some compaction issues and eventual waterlogging. But through the mid-season, we had frequent to heavy rainfalls, for the better part of June and July. And then as we headed into August through, basically present time, we really didn't have much, heavy rainfall to speak of through that second half of the growing season. The good news is our heavy soils really provided adequate moisture for pod set and fill. So overall I don't think we limited our yield potential at all by having that dry half of the season. We did see waterlogging, and it was an issue that caused some real yield variability for some producers, but where we didn't see that excess water, whether we had better drainage, lighter soils, or just the ability to get that soil the water off the field, really high yields, were documented, in those situations. When we talk about, wet seasons like that too, a lot of times, we'll talk about our fungal pathogens such as white mold, which was definitely present here in the Michigan crop this season, but overall to me was not one of our huge limiting factors. That dry second half of the season, really put the damper, on both, white mold and anthracnose, to a point where they're present, but not severe in the crop. And then, to discuss our irrigated acres in West Michigan, a lot of times we'll split the crop kind of into east and west, where black, navy, and small red beans are grown in the east, and then our large seeded kidney beans are grown in the west under irrigation. They really experienced, higher than average yields, in that part of the state this year, which was really good timing for them, as they have dealt, with some weather issues the past few seasons. This year, that was not the case. Moving on to Michigan stocks, I'll reference, the MDARD dry bean stocks report for this segment. Each year, in September, this, inventory report comes out from elevators, as of August 31st. It really provides us a snapshot, of what we do have, in storage at that timing for every year. This year, as of August 31st, 2024, elevators in Michigan held just over 1 million hundredweights in inventory, which if we look at, our 5-year average, that's slightly below, where that average normally is, with the exception of 2020, our pandemic year, which I think will forever live as an outlier, in these data sets. We're slightly below historical averages, but really not by much, so we're trending on an average year. And you can see that report does, break this out, by navy, small red, black, and then all other classes of beans, that are in storage. And then if we get to our outlook, going forward, I would say both our short and long-term outlook, compared to the Chicago Board of Trade, which is a really important thing to keep in mind here, is optimistic. Beans have been a good spot in our producers' rotation, and values may be slightly down going into next season, but compared to competing crop, it really has been a good spot in their rotation, and a profitable crop for our producers. So there's a lot of excitement about beans still headed into 2025. Market conditions, definitely supported black beans over other classes last year's. And Michigan growers definitely responded. If you can look at the data, we went heavy into black beans, due to those market conditions. Michigan's production diversity does continue to be an asset. We really pride ourselves, on producing 10 plus classes of beans a year. And we're really proud of that. And we could have used a few more of those kidney beans this year, and it's a good thing we had good weather for them in that part of the state. But overall, we could have used a few more bags. And then Michigan, processors are definitely busy shipping. They're well over 2/3 of their inventory has already been priced, based on most reports, which is a good spot to be in. And those same processors are really continuing to invest in infrastructure. When we talk about storage, processing capacity, food safety, all those good things, labor is short here in the state, and we're continuing to see improvements in that capital investment to really maintain the stability of our industry. And once again, the genetic potential of this crop really continues to give growers a lot of confidence in the future, especially in black and navy beans. We've seen a lot of advancements, and new adoption of varieties here in the state that have really upped our yield potential. If we kind of go back to my opening comments there on yield, where we're predicted to have an above average yield for the state, where we had some really inclement weather conditions, for the majority of the growing season. It kind of shows how far we've come, on the genetic front, as well as management, how well our dry bean growers are managing, these new genetics that we're working with. So overall, really excited, to look forward to 25 after a successful 2024 here in the state of Michigan.
Good morning. My name is Jon Sperl, and I'm reporting to you from Western Nebraska, the Panhandle of Nebraska, and I will give you the highlights from Nebraska today. It's kind of unique in that Courtney Schuler will be doing the Rocky Mountain Bean Dealers region, which includes Nebraska, but we broke that out just for the two different reports here. So I will be dealing basically with just the Nebraska region. So next. As far as Nebraska quality goes, so Nebraska virtually has all edible bean production is under irrigation, which allows us year in, year out to have a quality that's very desirable in the marketplace. It just because we don't totally rely on rain, we can have a quality product each year. This year, the 2024 harvest was a very open harvest. We are, just 3 hours from the Rocky Mountains, so we do have a lot of weather events that roll off the mountains and come through our area. But for 2024, we had a very open harvest, no rain delays, obviously without rain, we didn't have hail during the harvest window. So again, no delays there. Oftentimes, if we do get a rain during harvest, it has a tendency to affect quality. So of course, without those delays, we didn't have darker beans as a result. That being said, no rain, we were hot and dry, causing the edible beans to dry down very quickly again this year. So a little bit of a challenge sometimes to get the moisture, frankly, as high as we'd like to coming into the bins. We do have very, very nice beans, and I'm going to basically focus on Great Northerns and Pintos. Obviously, we do have a few little niche markets of other beans produced in the region, but they're so small, and I will mention them later. But very, very few colored beans, if you will, or different beans in our growing area. So again, Great Northerns, very nice, bright Great Northerns this year. We're happy to say that the seed coats were tight, canning quality is available. And not much more to say there. A great harvest for Great Northerns. Pintos, again, very, very beautiful beans, beautiful color, maybe slightly smaller than people have come to expect out of Nebraska, but that's always debatable. And there has been no pushback from the market. They love the bean, and there's no complaints about size this year. So next slide is about Nebraska yields. Always hard to put a solid number on that. The Scottsbluff-Gehring Valley in particular had a lot of early hail, early enough that they were able to replant, but later beans with the heat in July and August kind of tempered our yields for the year. So weren't able to have a fantastic yield profile this year, but I think most would concur we were slightly below average across the Panhandle into Wyoming on yields for 2024 crop. The Nebraska stocks, again, the next slide would deal with the Nebraska stocks. We had a very solid harvest number. Warehouses, I think, are relatively full, and people, the companies operating in the area are happy with that. I mentioned here Nebraska kidneys. Obviously, everyone is calling, wondering about kidneys. There are so few raised in Nebraska, mostly in that what we would call the southwest corner, but I think it's 20,000 bags or less. And of course, as all kidneys seem to be, they are spoken for at this point. Pintos, to me, the pinto market has been very, very steady. September and October was very steady as far as demand from the marketplace, which was exciting. Obviously, we all know that demand last year created a lot of opportunities. I think shelves were pretty bare, warehouses were pretty empty going into the 2024 crop, so a lot of early shipping. Outlook was very good there. Commodity has moved, and it's the market has received the beans this year very quickly and without any complaints. So that's great. Great Northerns have been a little bit quieter than I expected, given the world supply of white beans this year. As world white bean stocks have dwindled, however, it seems like the interest in Great Northerns has come up. Of course, they're a little premium priced bean. And I expect late fall, early winter, we'll see some movement. Obviously, we saw some more white beans get moved out of Egypt or sold out of Egypt into Algeria here just recently. So that's a second large purchase. I think Turkish white bean production domestically has sort of met their immediate demand needs, but there will be some further need later in the fall. So as far as the Nebraska outlook, to me, very steady movement this fall, and I expect basically November through March is going to continue to be very steady. The Mindak area, obviously, we've already heard their comments earlier in the report here. They had some prior commitments and shipping constraints, providing some opportunities for our region. We're a little bit more fortunate when it comes to rail service here, so some opportunities for us to ship into those markets as there's been can be a struggle in the region up north, as well as commitments that didn't allow them to jump on that September-October shipping window. Great Northerns, getting back to that class of bean. Obviously, we all know that alubia is out of Argentina. We're short this year due to several reasons there, I should say. The large Egyptian white sales into Algeria, creating some marketing opportunities for Great Northerns. Obviously, the Europeans have become used to the alubias due to many reasons, but tariffs being probably the primary. So it's nice to be hearing back from some customers that have gotten used to the alubia supply the last 5 or 6 years. As far as colored beans in 2025, it's kind of an interesting question to look at. Is it going to be popular? Is it going to create some additional interest from producers? Yet to be seen. Obviously, the prices make one look and wonder, and yet I think we have kind of proven in our growing area, because of how arid we are, we don't usually have really, really good luck with kidneys, black, some of the colored beans, if you will, just because it is such an arid climate here. They just don't look good most years. So I'm guessing there'll be a little bit more interest, but I don't expect it to be significant. We've had 3 hot, dry summers in a row, and I would caution that it, as I mentioned earlier, has caused beans to dry down very quickly, and there's some fragility there. I mean, when you go, rather than having a 12 to 14 moisture, you have a 10 to 12, it just seems like the beans are a little bit more prone to split because of the dryness. Obviously, we all watch other commodity prices. They haven't gone up, and at the lower prices in our region, we basically have corn, sugar beets, wheat are the primary competitors for acres, and those commodities are at prices right now that edible beans are very attractive to the grower. So I think we'll get acres again in 2025 crop, which provides an opportunity for us to present those to the world. I guess I should mention the stocks. I think I'm very comfortable with the numbers that most of us are thinking. Pinto production in our region was probably about 1.4 million bags, and Great Northerns, I would say about 800,000 is a good round figure, 750 to 850, and 800 obviously in the middle there. So I think that was our production for the year. I mentioned kidneys, again, 20,000 bags or fewer. Those are kind of the big numbers that I think that I should report here today. And hopefully that answers your questions. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time if you have any further questions. Thanks for allowing me to give the Nebraska report here to you this year.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. And my name is Courtney Schuler. I work for Trinidad Benham Corporation, and I work in the Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, kind of Rocky Mountain region. So I will be talking to you about basically our harvest overview from that area this year. Next slide. So talking about production this year, Idaho, Colorado, and Wyoming are all important states in this region. And Idaho and Wyoming in particular are two of the main states that produce a lot of the dry edible bean seed that is grown in the US each year. So those are very key states for that production. And obviously that leads to our commercial production each year. And when you look at production in this area, it is almost 100% irrigated. And that is because of the arid climate in the Western United States. And a lot of that irrigation water comes from snowfall in the mountains throughout the winter. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. In the chart below, you'll see the crop production report from the October 2024 data that we received here recently. And you can see the change in planted acres, harvested acres, yield, and total production from last year to this year. And, you know, it's a trend throughout the US that we did see increased planted acres due to the competitive pricing of dry beans this season. And that obviously led to an increase in acres and an increase in total production. The yield was a little bit variable due to some other factors when it comes to weather and heat and other things that can cause some issues with dry bean production. But overall, I would say yields were, and we'll talk about this a little bit more here in a minute, but yields were pretty average in most of these areas. But you can see our production for Idaho increased about 23% over last year. In Colorado, it increased about 81%, and in Wyoming, about 11%, based on these estimates. Next slide. When we look at yields a little bit more closely, like I said, they were average to slightly above. I think this is true for Idaho and Wyoming. In Colorado, though, if you look at the data, you'll see that those average yields are maybe slightly below traditional averages. And I think that's because of the weather that we saw in that state that took out some acres completely again this year. That's happened now 2 years in a row with some severe hail that we've had down in certain pockets. And that affected some pinto and light red kidney and that production. And hopefully we won't see that moving forward. Hopefully we can get a year off from that severe weather. But overall, quality was good to excellent in all of these three states and really throughout the West, because we had really warm and dry conditions, which beans love. And harvest, we had warm and dry conditions as well, except for maybe a few systems that went through up in the Idaho region. But nothing that really significantly affected our quality or our harvest. And stocks were pretty low going into harvest on most of the market classes produced in this region. Pintos, when you look at commercial production, pintos are probably the highest produced in this area. And then this region produces pretty much every market class that the US produces. Okay, moving into the next slide. So as we said, low stocks going into most of the classes for this season. But the increased acres and the average harvest should have replenished most of those. It is a little bit too soon to know exactly what that's going to look like as we transition into planning for the 2025 season, but we have a great supply to supply our customers for this current season. Next slide, please. So the outlook for 2025, prices have to stay really competitive with other crops and also with feed production. The Western U.S. produces a lot of livestock, and so we don't only look at competition versus other commodity crops, but also feed crops when we're looking at what those producers are going to plant moving into the next year. Irrigation water availability is really important too, and that's why the drought monitor is shown on this slide. That shows basically what our precipitation has done and how we're looking there. And you can see the darker the color, the worse off we are at this moment in time, and it looks much different now than we looked a year ago when we were sitting in pretty good shape. And then, it's been the same story for quite some time on volatile input costs for producers and weed and pest control costs and challenges as we have that as a continued issue with dry bean production. So I think all of these are going to play into what those choices are for acres as we move into 2025. So, overall, it was a great year. It was nice to have a good alternative for some of the other commodities when those prices had some pressure on them this season. And I think everybody's interested to see what the next few months look like as we move into planning for next year. So thank you for having me today. I hope that we can answer any questions you have here in a little bit. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Martin Squires. I am a bean grower in the Central Valley of California. And today it is my privilege to welcome all of you on behalf of the California Dry Bean Advisory Board and the United States Dry Bean Council to sunny California. It is another sunny day here, and I understand it's going to change next week. We're looking at a couple of possible storms, and our bean harvest should be wrapped up by then, so we're ready for rain. Just a little bit about myself. I am obviously I am a bean grower. I grow black-eyed beans, but I also do custom farming. I go out and I plant other growers' fields for them. We take care of them in various ways. A lot of times we have new growers, and I get to help them, talk them through the summer and what to do and when and how to go about doing it. And then we get to harvest their fields in the fall. So it's a good deal for me because, not only do we make our living doing that, but I get to have contact with quite a few other growers and see what's going on in the industry and some of the different warehouses. And then, of course, serving on the Dry Bean Advisory Board, I get contact with everyone. So it's something I very much enjoy. I am very proud of the California farmers and what we can accomplish. We have a wonderful Mediterranean climate here. We can grow just about anything. This year in particular, though, our planting was delayed a little bit. We had rains late into the spring, and everything got to be a little bit late. But hopefully over the next few weeks, or actually the next few days, harvest will be wrapping up. We had a pretty good growing season, other than we had a terrible amount of heat this year. We had more several-day heat waves than I ever remember having in my lifetime. I'm 61 years old, so I've been around for this a while. And we would have several days of 110 plus heat. And unfortunately, that affected our yields. We had a lot of problems with blooms aborting and just falling off of the plant. And it unfortunately has affected our production overall, pretty much with all varieties. And it seems to be a little worse in some areas compared to others, which is kind of interesting. But Fortunately for us, all of our quality, even though our production is down, our quality looks pretty good. We've been able to harvest some pretty good looking crops. We've had little to no rain to affect things, and for our harvest, it's been a very good year. Next slide, please. As I said, our yields are down a little bit. I'm guessing somewhere in the, what did I say, 15 to 20% has affected our yields overall. And it's really been interesting as a black eye grower. I planted a field near Modesto, California in very early June. And as I finished that field, I went directly to a field about 5 miles away in Houston and planted a field there. And both of those fields were hit by heat during a bloom time, and pods or the blooms just aborted. And both fields were just an absolute production disaster. They looked good all summer long, but they did not produce well at all. But now I had other fields right next door to my disaster field that they were planted a week or two later, and they did incredibly well. So just that little bit of a time difference as far as when the heat would hit, it just made all the difference in the world. We went from an absolutely normal average crop to going backwards to an absolute disaster crop. So it was really interesting the way that each the different fields did just because of a few days planting difference. Something we've seen largely in our large limas is so many pods aborted due to the heat that our growers kept irrigating them a little bit longer, trying to get like replacement sets in the beans. And I'm hearing some different things. I'm hearing that it helped, but I'm also hearing that it really didn't help as much as they would have liked. So if we move to the next slide, please. Our inventory and stock. This is the California Dry Bean Inventory and Movement Report. This is one of the great things we have in California, and this is free to anybody who wants to call in and request it. If you see down at the bottom of the numbers is the California Dry Bean Advisory phone number. Nathan Sano, who manages the California board and does a great job, give him a call and give him your email address, and he will send it to you. It's a monthly report. We try to stay on top of it just as much as we possibly can and keep it accurate and up to date. And Nathan's one of the nicest guys you will ever meet. You will hang up and you will have enjoyed your conversation with him. So this is just one of the great things that California has to offer as far as our inventory and supply. And again, it's by the month, so you can look at it any month and see how many beans we're moving, what we have on hand, and it's just a great tool for anyone to have and use. Next slide, please. Outlook next year. The 2024 across the board, all our varieties just about doubled in planted acreage. Again, our production was down a little bit, so we didn't quite realize the production numbers that we hoped we would have. But overall, it was it was a good year. 2025, that's a little bit different story. We expect our production numbers to be down a little bit. For various reasons, market reasons and grower reasons, but we're thinking that especially in our baby limas and baby greens, that production of those will be down a little bit. We are expecting large limas to go up, and we think that black eyes will probably stay about the same. And our four main varieties, we do garbanzos, black eyes, baby limas, and large limas. But we also grow some of the common bean varieties, kidneys, yellows, blacks, pinks, and cranberries. So all of those are available should you have a specific interest in it. And again, when you're talking to Nathan, you can get a list of the warehouses here in California, and you can give them a call and let them know what you're looking for. And if it's not something that we have on hand, we can look. The warehouses are happy to look for a grower who will grow those for you specifically. So that's something that it works pretty well for us as well. something that is not mentioned here in any of these slides, but when we harvest a field of beans, whatever variety it might be, and we take those to the warehouse, they're assigned a number, and we can, should any problem arise anywhere down the line with a variety of beans, we can track it directly back to the grower, to the field, the grower who grew it, all of the history of the field, what different things were applied to the ground, and anytime a problem should arise, which I have to say is pretty rare, we can trace it right back and we can take care of everything for you. So it's a great time to be a bean grower in California. I love what I do. It is one of the great joys in my life to farm beans. I love that I feed people instead of, I grew feed for animals for years, and that was fine. But I don't know, there's something about watching a crop go that you know is going to help feed the world. So again, I am Martin Squires, and I have enjoyed talking to you. And give us a call, and let's see what California can do for you. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Sam Villegas with Farmer Bean and Seed. I'm going to be giving a brief presentation on the 2024 bean crop in Washington State. To start off, give a little bit of background on Washington State. We are far from the largest production state, but I'd say that we are one of the most diverse in terms of all the different classes of beans that we produce. We produce all the major, very large classes of beans, such as pintos, black beans, small reds. But we also produce some of the more specialty classes, light red kidneys, dark red kidneys, cranberry beans, and yellows, and then also some of the very small, more niche classes like green baby limas and small whites. And a big part of the reason we're able to do that is because of our primary growing region, the Columbia Basin. It's a 600,000 acre, give or take, irrigated farm project just east of the Columbia River. And I'm obviously biased because I live here, but I think it's one of the best areas in the country to consistently grow a good quality, good color bean year in, year out. And while the cost of production for our growers is higher in Washington State than other areas of the country, we do have a freight advantage off the West Coast, being so close to the Port of Seattle, and we try to take advantage of that to stay competitive. In terms of yields and production this year in Washington, we had roughly 55,000 acres of dry beans harvested in 2024. That's up around 70% from 2023. We had production increases acreage-wise in every class, with some classes doubling and tripling in size. And so we definitely had a big year in terms of production acreage-wise, but we also had a huge year in terms of yield. Across the board, in all classes of beans, we're consistently seeing a 1 to 2 bag increase in yield, sometimes up to 3 or 4. So anywhere from 50 to 200 kilos more per acre in every class. And so we have a lot of beans coming out of Washington State this year. With an excellent growing season and also a relatively rain-free harvest, we're also seeing really, really nice quality out of the field. So while we have a lot of beans, we also have a lot of really nice looking beans, which makes marketing and selling these beans much easier. In terms of stocks, inventories, markets, I've tried to group classes into market trends to sort of make it easier to go through. We don't want to take up too much time being that we have so many classes to get through. Maybe not the best way to do it, but definitely the quickest to kind of get a snapshot of what's going on in Washington State. So to start off with the big bean classes, pintos, blacks, small reds, for the first 9 months of the year, these markets were all very soft. Soft enough it was hard to get our growers to participate, and we weren't necessarily super excited to participate in these markets either. That's really changed in the last month, and especially in the last week to 10 days, namely with pinto beans, to where we've seen these markets strengthen to a level where now we're able to participate, and our growers are willing to sell, and we're happy to sell to customers at the current market levels. Pintos, we had a pretty big crop this year, around 350,000 bags. I would expect to have good availability going into the summer. Black beans, we had about a 250,000 bag crop. I would also expect good availability statewide going into the summer. Small reds, the one caveat is we had about 120,000 bag crop, but we are seeing customers starting to use certain varieties of small reds as a substitution for dark red kidneys. So on a normal year, I would expect good availability into the summer, but if we begin to see more customers using small reds as a substitute for dark red kidneys, we could be looking at a situation where inventories begin to run quite a bit lower early spring. And then Great Northern's not a huge class, but with 30 or 40,000 bags of production and that market starting to get to where we'd like to see it, I would expect that we're able to move that class relatively quickly, possibly still have some availability early summer. Moving on to yellow beans and cranberry beans, these are classes that we would consider kind of staples of the Washington bean catalog. Our growers are good at growing them. We like growing them. We do really well with them, and we really want to support these markets. That being said, we had massive crops relative to the size of those markets in Washington this year. Yellow beans were about 350,000 bags. Cranberry beans were at about 200,000 bags. So huge crops, and we kind of had to make a determination at the beginning of the year, just kind of that supply and demand equation, and prices came down a little bit, but sales have been very consistent all year, especially with cranberry beans have really picked up in the last month or so. I would expect cranberry beans to have availability through early spring, but if sales continue at the pace they have been, I know we're going to do everything we can to move those as soon as we can. Yellow beans, I think the state's goal would be to move that crop by the time the Sinaloa, Mexico crop comes off. So a lot of beans, but they're moving well, and we're really happy with that. Moving on to green babies and small whites. Small whites are actually a different class than navy beans. Some people get those confused, but these are both very small classes. However, we do export a lot of green baby limas, about a 40,000 bag crop this year, 40 to 50,000 bag crop this year. Both green baby limas and small whites have stayed strong, very similar to 2023. We would expect to have good availability of both those classes going into early summer. And finally, light red kidneys, dark red kidneys. I think everybody knows the story on these two classes. Hindsight being 2020, I would have liked to produce, 4 or 5 times more than we did in the state. But given what the kidney market has been in the last couple of years, I think that was a market we were a little bit leery of going too heavily into. That all being said, I think everybody knows that market is quickly headed to zero in terms of availability. And that's especially true in Washington. And I think prices currently reflect that. One class I didn't touch on, pinks. We had about 10,000 bags of pinks produced in Washington this year. Those, for the most part, are sold. When it's all said and done, there may be a handful of loads left in Washington to sell in the early spring. Finally, moving on to outlook for 2025 in Washington State. As of today, competing crops in Washington State are relatively weak, whether we're talking about wheat or corn or processor crops or forage crops. Right now, beans are sitting in a really nice spot in terms of how attractive an option that is to growers. It feels a lot like it did last year at this time. So I think we're set up right now to have a really good crop again in 2025. I'm not sure it'll be as big as it was in 24, but I would expect it to be a really strong crop as things stand today. In terms of markets and how much we'll produce of each class, I think it's a little bit early to say one way or the other. But I would expect good cranberry and good yellow production for sure. So thanks so much. I appreciate you guys' time. Make sure and reach out with any questions during the Q&A section, and thanks for having me.
Hello, good day. My name is Alejandro Leloir. I am the representative for Central South America and the Caribbean for the United States Driving Council. I hope you're having a good morning, and well, I will give you a very brief update about the global situation and a little briefing about the expectations for 2025 market situation for dry beans. I always like to start presentations placing ourselves in time regarding the dry bean harvest. So we are currently in November, we have another harvest starting in December in Brazil and in Central America. And I understand that Mexico is finalizing their spring-summer cycle. And the next dry bean producer with exportable surplus will be Argentina, that comes out in June, July. This has been the best year since I could find records for U.S. dry bean exports, mainly encouraged by the very, very severe drought that Mexico and part of Central America and the Caribbean faced during 2024. Exports were up by more than 20% compared to last year. Regarding the dry bean market, I have been looking at this situation with Brazil for the past years, and well, the Brazilian industry has been expressing their interest of becoming a black bean exporter, and this finally took place in 2024. Here I have exports until June, that was 20,000 metric tons, but if we move to date, it's probably closer to 60,000 metric tons. So this was a very new and disruptive tendency in the black bean market, and we need to see if that's something that will continue in time or is something that took place to take an opportunity of the drought and very high demand from Mexico last year. Brazil has interesting advantage over Argentina if we focus in South American black bean production, and is that they come out 1 month and a half earlier than Argentina. So that's an interesting dynamic, and it doesn't only influence black bean exports from Brazil, but it will also change the dynamic between Brazil and Argentina, because Brazil is no longer demanding the volumes that they used to demand from Argentina. So Argentina will also need to look for different markets for their exports. This situation was mainly encouraged by the second, or made possible by the second harvest of Brazilian black beans that took place in last April and June, which had a 53% increase according to CONAB. Not all industry members agree with CONAB figures, because sometimes they count twice the volume of dry beans if dry beans change hands during the commercial process. But the tendency is there, and it was definitely a record production. Looking at the time, we are looking at the current time. Brazil just finalized a small crop under irrigation, so they also have some beans available now, but they are virtually out of the market because of the very, very high freight costs that they are facing to sell to the main export destinations. If we move to Central America, I want to briefly mention some interesting dynamics that are taking place there. Guatemala's domestic crop has been steadily shrinking over the past 3 years. And according to industry members, this is due to most Guatemalan farmers are very small farmers, and they don't have the financial capacity to face to face failures in harvest. So what happened after the rough couple of years they faced is that they looked for different job opportunities and either moved to the city or migrated to the US or elsewhere, and that is steadily decreasing the amount of farmers in that country, and as a consequence, the domestic production is decreasing, and the country is looking for a bigger import demand every year. Nicaragua, which is the main dry bean producer in Central America and the only one with a steady export surplus, they have 3 crops a year, and they planted the next crop, which is the second crop, or postrera, how they know it domestically. They planted between 2 and 3 weeks later than usual because of lack of rain when they were planting. So the crop is late, but besides that, it should be in fairly well condition. Haiti is, as most of you know, is going through a very severe social and economic problem over the past couple of years. So most of their dry bean imports are being done through the Dominican Republic because it's very difficult to deal with Haiti directly, and there's a chance that they will be consuming dry beans for humanitarian purposes in the coming months. If we place ourselves in February last year, the Dominican Republic was harvesting their domestic crop, which also suffered a great deal because of dry weather, and that increased import demands, mainly for pinto and cranberry beans. So that also influenced U.S. exports to that origin, which were also record high. Going back to South America, Colombia is currently harvesting a domestic crop, which according to industry sources is going pretty well, and they have been getting some domestic production of kidney beans and other varieties, so that give a little rest to the kidney bean market, which is extremely demanded right now. Moving south and continuing with the kidney bean tendencies, Argentina had a very complicated crop last year, or earlier this year, sorry, especially for white and kidney beans. And as many importers counted on Argentina as an origin for kidney beans, most of the kidney and white bean production in that country was destined to fulfill existing contracts, and the spot demand or the spot availability was extremely limited. As a consequence, buyers moved back to the US to look for their kidney bean demand. And the US is also pretty much sold out. So the kidney bean market is extremely tight right now. Looking ahead for Argentina in 2025, they had a problem with corn leaf hoppers that will limit the planting intention for corn in the dry bean production area. That adds up to the expensive local freight costs, so that will limit the planting intention for corn. Soybeans are also facing a bad year regarding prices because of the very good harvest So the option that most farmers have will be dry beans. So those three factors will increase the planting intentions for dry beans in Argentina next year. Another interesting dynamic is that, as I mentioned with Brazil, Argentina lost its natural black bean market. As Brazil is not currently demanding black beans, and it will only buy when they see an opportunity or low prices. The next point, availability, price, and quality of seed, means that the alluvia and kidney bean supply for seed is very limited. And the only dry bean that is currently available and easier to produce are black beans. And well, international freights, as we all know, are going through a crisis, so that limits the destinations that Argentina can place their crop. So everything indicates that planting intentions for 2025 will be high, and that Argentina needs to reconfigure its black bean destinations. But it's important to note that the same situation was configuring for the 2024 crop, and at the end, weather conditions and the lack of agricultural technology, mainly seed, limited Argentina's production. So we will see how things go this year. But I want to encourage everyone in this call to keep trusting U.S. steady and reliable supply to avoid being in a situation where you might be in a tough spot to meet your demand. U.S. politics raised some concerns about the possibility of Europe reestablishing retaliatory tariffs, and global logistics continue to be a major issue. So that's pretty much my very quick summary, and I look forward to seeing everyone at the questions section. And if you have any, or if you want to discuss anything further, you can see my email here. I am always available. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos días a todos. My name is Raul Caballero. I'm the in-market representative for the U.S. Driving Council in Mexico. And today I am going to present a summary of the spring-summer cycle from the production states in Zacatecas, Durango, Chihuahua, San Luis Potosí, and Guanajuato. This is a summary from a study contracted by the U.S. Driving Council. In 2024, as we all know, with El Niño, there was abundant rain that offered an optimistic outlook to the production of dry beans in Mexico for this production cycle. It allowed that 89% of the beans would be planted on time, only leaving 11% to be planted late. And after the first month, rains dropped between 20 to 37% in the main three states of Durango, Zacatecas, and Chihuahua. But basically in Chihuahua, rains became absent. And this caused, in general, plant stress and low yields. And after the field inspections, it was determined that around 141,000 bean hectares would not be planted, reducing the total harvesting area to 741,234 hectares, corresponding to 84.1% of the total planted. The reason is that at the end of August, first half of September, precipitations were irregular, as I mentioned, in Zacatecas and Durango, and basically absent in Chihuahua. In some bean areas of these states, there was poor plant development, due to water stress, resulting in null pod formation and total loss, mainly affecting black beans. As we can see in the table below, the preliminary numbers by the Agricultural Systems Information Agency, they forecasted a planting of 1,227,842 hectares, resulting in a planted surface of 881,424, and with the damaged hectares of 140,000, the final number that was assessed was of 741,234 hectares. As we can see here in this table, I'm going to start with the left. We can see in the bottom side that we have the reported production numbers as of the report in the month of November of 2023, and we compare it with this year's field inspection that was done in October in 2024. And what we can see is a difference of 71% increase of the resultant production of 239,988 metric tons in 2023 to 410,000 metric tons at 768 estimated for 2024, where we have an increase in the colored beans of 79%, comparing 23 with 24, 159% increase comparing pinto beans produced in 2023 towards 2024. And then finally, we have a 32% increase in blacks, going from 142,000 metric tons to 189,000 metric tons. On our right side, we can see that the quality that was produced in the different states goes this way. It was assessed that the total production had an excellent quality in a 5%. A good quality came out 68%, and 8% in regular and 19% in bad quality. If we break it down by the states, we can see that there was a 25% of an excellent quality in Chihuahua, which would be the irrigated, good at 10%, a 5% regular, and a 60% bad. In the case of Durango, 3% is assessed excellent, 83% is good, and 14% is regular. In Guanajuato, 100% was good. San Luis Potosí, 100% was good. And in Zacatecas, 70% was good, 9% was regular, and 21% was assessed as bad. And as I said, it drops from 630,000 metric tons average to 411 metric tons estimated in 2024. So this is a minus 34% compared to last year's estimate. Now, looking at yield, I'm going to start with the left. So we have first in 2023, the CAP estimation, which is the production agency. And then below, we have the report number 2 from 2023. So the original estimated yield was forecasted as 652 kilos as the average of the total of all the states that we can see here. And then when we obtained the results of report number 2 in 2023, it was assessed that it decreased to 455 kilos per hectare. Now, if we compare it to the estimate from the agency, from CAP's agency in October 2024, we see a yield, average yield for all the states of 513 kilos per hectare. And then the estimated forecast that was obtained with the report assessment in the month of October of 2024 is of 554 kilos in the total average, where we can see there's an increase in comparison with CIAP numbers. We have in Chihuahua, Durango, Guanajuato, San Luis Potosí, and Zacatecas. If we compare these numbers to the ones above, the forecast in the yield is much higher. In terms of availability for trading, if we look at the 2023 numbers, we see that we had 138,695 metric tons for trading. But if we look at 2024, we see that on production, we have for the availability of trading 307,307 metric tons, which of those 44,600 metric tons are going to be used for self-consumption and for seed. And then the total amount available for trading from this crop will be of 262,707 metric tons. This is a variation that shows an 89% compared to 2023. At the end of the Mexican commercial year, which is October 23 through September 24, consumption is estimated at 750,000 metric tons, equivalent to a monthly average of 63,000 metric tons and a per capita consumption of 5.8 kilograms per year. Driving imports closed at 459,000 metric tons, 2.3 times higher than the imported in 22-23, and exports ended at 24,000 metric tons. This is minus 19% less than the previous year. So a final inventory of 253,000 metric tons is estimated for the end of this commercial year. This is 134% more than a year ago and enough to supply 4 months of consumption. And then if we look at the prices outlook from this report, in the fourth week of October of 24, the average price paid to producers for field quality black beans at the production sites standed at 18,500 pesos, which is $940 per metric ton. And this is a minus 21% smaller amount than in October of 2023. And in the same period, the average pinto bean price paid to producer for field quality at the production site was of 19,000 pesos. This results into $970 per metric ton. This is minus 21.5% smaller than October of 2023. As we all know, Segalmex announced paying 27 pesos per kilo to some of the small producers. So this is only a program for the small producers eligibility. And basically the variety breakdown estimates as of November of 2024 is 46% or 189,000 metric tons of black beans. This is 32.4 higher than the 142,804 reported in 2023. 38% or 154,130 metric tons of pinto beans. This is 159% higher than the 59,482 metric tons reported in 2023, and 16% or 67,501 metric tons of color beans, which represents a 79% increase versus the reported in 2023 with 37,702 metric tons. So this is just a quick outlook, from this report. And, so you can have this information available. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and your preference to listen to the U.S. crop report. And now what we are going to do is that we are going to go to the question and answer session. So thank you very much for your time. This presentation